There is a route in British Columbia that cuts through a vast wilderness and is studded with a scenic spectacle of snow-capped peaks and lush forestry. But beneath its beauty is a place shrouded in pain and darkness. This eerie stretch of highway that extends over 724 kilometers has become an infamous landmark where numerous women, predominantly indigenous, have mysteriously vanished or been found tragically murdered. Venture with us as we examine a place that stands as a haunting testament to an alarming rate of unsolved murders and disappearances of indigenous women and girls in Canada. Welcome to the Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears began its dark journey into notoriety in the late 20th century. In the 1980s, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, began to notice a chilling pattern. Women, primarily indigenous, were going missing or being found murdered along a 724-kilometer stretch of Yellowhead Highway 16 in British Columbia. The number of victims was unsettling, and the cases were shrouded in mystery, unsolved, and haunting. In response to the growing number of cases, the RCMP organized a conference in 1981. This marked the first significant step towards formally acknowledging and addressing these tragedies, which were collectively referred to as the highway murders. But, as the years rolled on, the number of victims continued to rise, and the highway earned a more somber name: the Highway of Tears. This highway, once just another route cutting through the heart of British Columbia, began to represent something far more tragic. It became a somber symbol of loss, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of indigenous women and girls, and the systemic issues that contributed to their victimization. The concern grew over time, fueled by the persistent lack of resolution. The RCMP's acknowledgement of 18 cases stood in stark contrast to the claims of indigenous groups, who argued that the real number of victims exceeded 40. This discrepancy only added to the growing unease and outrage, turning the Highway of Tears into a symbol of tragedy and loss. As the years passed, the Highway of Tears became infamous, a symbol of a sinister pattern of disappearances and deaths. In a bid to bring justice to the victims, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, launched a special investigation, Project E-Pana, in 2005. This initiative was designed to probe into the heart of the mystery that had shrouded the Highway of Tears for decades, a mystery that had left too many women and girls missing or murdered, their fates unknown. Project E-Pana was not a small undertaking. It was a concentrated effort to illuminate the dark corners of this mystery, to seek out the truth behind each disappearance, each life lost. The name E-Pana is derived from Inuit mythology, where Pana was the god who cared for souls in the underworld before they were reincarnated. This reference to a caretaker of lost souls was a fitting descriptor for an operation tasked with seeking justice for those who could no longer seek it for themselves. But the scope of Project E-Pana was not limited to Highway 16 alone. As the investigation progressed, the RCMP realized that the pattern of disappearances and murders extended beyond the boundaries of the Highway of Tears. The investigation was expanded to include other highways, casting a wider net in search of answers. This expansion increased the number of victims under investigation from 9 to 18, almost doubling the scope of the project. The E-Pana investigation was, and still is, a complex and ongoing process. It involves sifting through mountains of evidence, retracing steps, and following leads that often wind up in dead ends. Yet despite the challenges, the investigators remain committed to their mission. Each case is treated with the utmost care. Each victim is more than just a number. They are individuals whose lives were tragically cut short, their stories left untold. Project E-Pana represents a beacon of hope in a sea of uncertainty. It is a testament to the dedication and resolve of those who seek justice, who fight to ensure that the victims of the Highway of Tears are not forgotten. Despite the dedicated efforts of Project E-Pana, many cases remain shrouded in mystery. These unsolved cases serve as a stark reminder that the journey to justice is long and winding, much like the Highway of Tears itself. But as long as there are mysteries to solve, as long as there are victims to remember, the work of Project E-Pana will continue, relentless in its pursuit of truth and justice. Each victim of the Highway of Tears had a story, a life cut tragically short. This chilling statement isn't an attempt to sensationalize, but rather to humanize, to bring to the forefront the lives that were lost and the potential that was extinguished far too early. Each name, each face represents a life that was filled with dreams, ambitions, love, and laughter, which was stolen away under the most horrifying and heartbreaking circumstances. Each one of these names is a stark reminder of the tragedy that has unfurled along this desolate stretch of highway. Let us take a moment to remember some of these souls whose lives were abruptly ended. Monica Ignace, just 15, was last seen in December of 1974. Her dreams, her future, so cruelly snuffed out. Then there's Alberta Williams, 24, her life full of promise, her spirit unbroken, until she was found lifeless in August of 1989. Delphine Nical, 16, vanished in June of 1990. Her disappearance, like a stone thrown into a pond, sent ripples of sorrow through her family and community. Ramona Wilson, 16 as well, disappeared in June of 1994. Her loss, a wound that refuses to heal in the hearts of her loved ones. And the list, tragically, goes on. The lives of these women and girls and many others were extinguished, their dreams unfulfilled, their potential untapped. They were daughters, sisters, friends, with lives that mattered, with stories that should have continued to unfold, not end along a lonely stretch of highway. While the Royal Canadian Mounted Police acknowledges 18 cases, Indigenous groups argue that the real number exceeds 40. Regardless of the exact count, each life lost is a tragedy, each one a chilling reminder of the urgent need for justice. Each one of these victims is more than a statistic. They were human beings with dreams and hopes, with families that loved them and communities that missed them. The victims of the Highway of Tears are a stark reminder of the deep-seated issues that plague our society. Their stories are a call to action, a plea for justice, a demand for change. They remind us of the urgent need to address the systemic problems that allowed such horrors to occur in the first place. The lost lives along the Highway of Tears are a chilling reminder of the urgent need for justice. Their stories are not just tales of sorrow and loss, but powerful catalysts for change, and it is up to us to ensure that their voices, though silenced, continue to echo loudly, demanding justice, demanding change, and reminding us all of the urgent need to ensure such a tragedy never repeats itself. The federal government took a significant step in 2015, launching a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This marked a pivotal moment, representing a nationwide recognition of the deep-seated issues that had long been plaguing the Indigenous communities. The inquiry spanned 2 years and involved extensive research, testimonies, and community meetings. It shed light on the systemic issues, including racism, sexism, and the economic marginalization faced by Indigenous women that made them vulnerable. The findings were stark and sobering, revealing that Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to be murdered or to go missing than any other women in Canada, and 16 times more likely than white women. Following the inquiry, a series of recommendations were made. These included reforms in the police department, better victim services, and improved use of media to raise awareness. An emphasis was placed on creating better relationships between the police and Indigenous communities, recognizing the historical mistrust and the need for culturally sensitive handling of cases. However, the road to change is long and arduous. Many of the recommendations are yet to be fully implemented, and the number of unsolved cases remains distressingly high. Yet, hope persists. Indigenous groups and other organizations continue to advocate for justice, pushing for the implementation of the inquiry's recommendations and keeping the issue in the public eye. Project E-Pana, The RCMP's investigation into these cases is still ongoing. Despite the challenges, there have been some successes. Several cases have been solved, providing a measure of closure to the affected families. Yet each solved case serves as a stark reminder of those that remain a mystery. The story of the Highway of Tears is a testament to the resilience of the indigenous communities. Despite the pain and the losses, they continue to fight for justice, for recognition, and for change. They strive to ensure that the lives lost along that desolate stretch of highway are not forgotten, and the lessons learned are not ignored. The fight for justice continues, as the haunting legacy of the Highway of Tears remains. The Highway of Tears, a chilling stretch of road, stands as a stark reminder of the unsolved cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This haunting strip of Yellowhead Highway 16 in British Columbia, stretching over 700 kilometers, has become notorious as the Highway of Tears. A somber testament to the tragedies that have unfolded here, the highway echoes with the stories of the many women who have vanished or been found murdered, the majority being Indigenous. Throughout our discussion, we've delved into the grim details of this mystery. The highway gained its chilling notoriety in the late 20th century, as case after case of missing or murdered women started to pile up. The exact number of victims remains disputed, with official counts by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police acknowledging 18 cases, while Indigenous groups argue that the real figure exceeds 40. We've explored the lives of these victims, their stories painting a vivid picture of the human cost of these unsolved cases. Each of these women and girls had their own dreams, aspirations, and families who are left to mourn and seek justice. We've also examined the investigative efforts, such as Project E-Pana, launched by the RCMP in 2005 to probe into these cases. Despite these initiatives, many cases remain unsolved, underlining the urgent need for continued efforts and resources. Finally, we've looked at the national inquiry, launched by the federal government, and the ongoing endeavors to bring justice to these victims. These efforts highlight the broader issues of violence against Indigenous women and girls in Canada and the vital importance of addressing them. As we leave the Highway of Tears behind, we carry with us the stories and the urgent call for justice, hoping one day the tears will cease to flow.